Cuban border agents fire upon Florida speedboat, killing 4. The Cuban Interior Ministry has said in a statement that it reserves the right to protect its territorial waters. Cuba's Ministry of the Interior MINT has announced that its border patrol forces engaged in a shootout with a speedboat from the United States, killing 4 people. In a statement published on social media, the Cuban government described the boat as having a license plate from the state of Florida, a peninsula roughly 145 kilometers, or 90 miles, from the island. It also accused the speedboat of firing the first shot, precipitating an exchange of gunfire. The crew of the violating speedboat opened fire on the Cuban personnel, resulting in the injury of the commander of the Cuban vessel, the statement said. As of the time of this report, 4 aggressors on the foreign vessel were killed, and 6 were injured. It is so far unclear what activities the speedboat was engaged in, and the identities of those on board remain unknown. But Wednesday's incident is not the first time that the Cuban government has engaged in a gunfight after allegedly intercepting U.S. boats entering its territory. Still, the latest example could prove to be particularly contentious, given the heightened tensions over the last 2 months between the U.S. and Cuba. An investigation into Wednesday's incident remains ongoing. The Interior Ministry, however, framed the Border Patrol's actions as part of its larger defense of Cuba's national sovereignty. In the face of current challenges, Cuba reaffirms its determination to protect its territorial waters, based on the principle that national defense is a fundamental pillar of the Cuban state in safeguarding its sovereignty and ensuring stability in the region, the ministry wrote. That latest incident took place on Wednesday morning, offshore from the barrier island Cayo Falcones in the north-central Villa Clara province. The shootout comes at a delicate time for Cuba's international relations, as it becomes increasingly isolated and as the U.S. threatens military action in Latin America. One of Cuba's closest regional allies, for instance, has seen upheaval at the hands of U.S. forces. On January 3, U.S. President Donald Trump authorized an early-morning military operation to abduct then-President Nicolas Maduro, transporting him to the U.S. for trial. Shortly after the attack, Trump and his officials issued statements suggesting they would welcome the fall of Cuba's communist government. "Look, if I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned," U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a longtime anti-Cuba hawk, told reporters. Trump, meanwhile, was more blunt. "Cuba looks like it's ready to fall," he said in the immediate aftermath. In the weeks since, the U.S. announced it would cut off supplies of Venezuelan money and oil to Cuba, and on January 29, it imposed an oil blockade on the island, threatening Cuba's trading partners with sanctions. In an executive order, Trump accused Cuba of representing an unusual and extraordinary threat to the U.S., citing its ties with adversarial governments like those in Iran, China, and Russia. "The government of Cuba has taken extraordinary actions that harm and threaten the United States," Trump wrote in the order. The regime aligns itself with and provides support for numerous hostile countries, transnational terrorist groups, and malign actors adverse to the United States. Cuba is one of several countries that have been subject to a maximum pressure campaign under Trump, who has sought to exert increasing influence over the Western Hemisphere. Relations with the U.S., however, have long been tense. As far back as 1958, Cuba came under a U.S. arms embargo that was later expanded in the 1960s to full trade embargo, spanning all products and services. The embargo cut Cuba off from one of its closest trading partners at the time. Cuban officials and human rights experts have also argued that the historically long embargo worsened humanitarian conditions on the island, which has suffered from a weakened economy and supply shortages. This is a breaking news story. More details to come. You have reached the end of our in-depth report. For more deep dives, please subscribe to Neuron News Global. Stay informed, stay ahead.